The wise person spends not less, but more precisely. Learn to count not only money, but also your breath. If you live with a constant feeling of lack, start saving not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. Saving is not a punishment, but a way to restore order, attention, and dignity. When you start to conserve your energy, money starts to obey. Most people live in a state of constant constriction. They save not for peace, but because they are afraid of running out. The fear of poverty has become the background of life. It makes any pleasure feel like guilt, any expense, anxiety. Even when there is enough money, the body lives as if everything will disappear tomorrow. This is not about the numbers, it is about trust. Saving and living well is the art of internal balance. When you don't go to extremes, not a spendthrift, not a miser, when you can afford things not out of a whim, but out of respect, when you don't buy for a feeling of worth because it's already within. This is not saving for profit, it is carefulness for the sake of peace. Life becomes easy when you stop fighting with money. It ceases to be an enemy because you stop fighting for the right to have it. Saving is not about spending less. It's about awareness. When you stop throwing resources where it's empty, when you stop paying for illusions. The problem for most is not the expenses, but the unconscious shame. People don't allow themselves joy because they feel they must earn it. They wait for abundance first, then pleasure. But it's the opposite. First, you must allow yourself to be worthy, and then abundance comes on its own. Frugality is not constriction, but a form of care. When you cherish what you have, not because you are afraid of losing it, but because you are grateful. Gratitude makes money alive. When you pay with gratitude, it returns. When you pay with fear, it disappears. Saving without love turns into poverty. Poverty is not in the wallet, but in the heart. It is a state where a person is afraid to allow themselves. When they are stingy not only with spending, but also with breath, attention, and warmth, then life shrinks like a cold fist. Learn to feel the boundary between awareness and deprivation. If there is constriction inside, if guilt comes after a purchase, it means saving has turned against you. But if there is peace after spending, it means everything is right. Life doesn't demand sacrifices, it demands presence. When you start looking at money not through fear, but through respect, everything around you changes. The feeling that you are living for survival disappears. Lightness comes. You no longer save, you choose. And this choice makes you rich, even if you have little in your account. To live well means to feel sufficient, not externally, but internally. When you can allow yourself joy without the fear that you will pay for it with pain. When you understand that peace is also a luxury. And most importantly, it costs nothing but honesty with yourself. Stop proving that you are doing well. The deepest level of saving is the refusal to pay for impressions. When you stop spending to seem, space appears inside for you to be. To save means to stop buying illusions. The world has taught us to substitute inner wealth with external symbols. We spend not for pleasure but to confirm our own significance. Purchases have become a way to suppress anxiety, not to fill life. People wear brands as armor to hide insecurity, but luxury bought out of fear always smells of poverty. Poverty begins where things become a substitute for love. When you buy to feel alive, it's still empty inside. This emptiness is not filled no matter how much you spend. Because it's not about money, it's about connection. A person cannot be satiated while living without internal meaning. Sometimes the desire to buy is the desire to be noticed. You don't want the thing. You want confirmation that you exist. And the stronger the fear of being unseen, the greater the spending. This is not extravagance. It is a way to not feel loneliness. But when you understand that a thing cannot provide presence, the race ends. The illusion of wealth is more dangerous than poverty. Because it keeps you dependent. A person who lives for ostentatious abundance is always internally poor. They constantly need more not to feel empty. But wealth is not in quantity, but in tranquility. The rich person is one who can afford not to explain. When you stop spending for status, money stops leaking away. Energy returns because it is no longer spent on the mask. Respect for money appears within you, not as a goal, but as a partner. Then even a simple thing becomes beautiful because it has meaning. If you want to live well, don't hide behind the shine. Let there be less, but let it be yours. Let it be simple, but honest. Simplicity is not poverty, but a form of strength. People who have found peace inside do not need to show off. They radiate confidence, even when they are wearing nothing expensive. Don't be afraid to look modest. Modesty, filled with dignity, is always stronger than ostentatious luxury. It does not ask for recognition because it does not depend on the gaze of others. When you stop paying for approval, you start living. To live well means not buying proof, but creating internal fullness. When every no to external expectations becomes a yes to yourself. When you no longer exchange peace for impression. When you can afford not to shine because the light comes from within. True wealth is the ability to be unnoticed and yet feel that you have everything. When you don't need to make noise to be valuable, when you can quietly sit in your life and know you are home. Start treating money as a living entity that feels your attitude. When you cherish it with respect, it responds. When you spend with gratitude, it returns. Money does not like fuss and does not tolerate contempt. It flows where there is order and calm. Many treat money as something hostile. They either cling to it or fear it or blame it for all problems. But this is just a reflection of inner chaos. Money comes not where it is counted, but where it is trusted. If there is anxiety inside, the flow always breaks. True saving begins with internal discipline, not with spreadsheets, but with respect. When you know why you earn and why you spend, when you stop acting automatically. Any unconscious spending is a form of energy leakage. Every time you buy something you don't need, you pay with attention, not money. Stop treating money with guilt. Money is not dirt or evil. It is a form of life exchange. It is the language on which the world speaks of trust. When you are ashamed of money, you close the flow. When you are afraid to lose it, you yourself create scarcity. Everything you fear begins to control you. To restore respect for money, start seeing it as energy, not as a problem. Respect is not hoarding, but awareness. Every time you make a conscious choice, money becomes your ally. And even if there is little of it, it begins to serve, not run away. Gratitude is magic that always works. Be grateful for being able to pay, not just for what you receive. Be grateful for products, for a roof, for the possibility of choice. Gratitude does not increase money directly, but it removes anxiety. And when anxiety disappears, the flow returns. Don't spend out of fear. Money spent in anxiety leaves forever. Money spent with respect creates a circle. It is important not how much you give, but in what state. Even a small amount spent with peace carries more strength than large expenditures made out of panic. To live well is not to live richly. It is to live in an orderly manner. When you have an internal rhythm where everything is in its place. When you know how much you need and you don't spend energy on the superfluous. When you choose quality over quantity. Don't be afraid to be frugal. Frugality is not boredom. It is maturity. It is respect for what is given. When you don't throw resources to the wind because you understand their value. And the more respect, the greater the flow. Money is like water. It flows where there is form. If you want money to work for you, stop treating it as an enemy. Make it your ally. Let every ruble be a sign of gratitude, not fear. Let every purchase be an act of awareness, and then saving will cease to be a restriction. It will become freedom. Learn to see beauty in simplicity. This is the main secret of how to save and still live well. When you stop looking for pleasure in quantity and start finding it in quality, life stops being a chase. Simple things begin to shine. A cup of morning coffee, order on the table, clean air, a conversation without haste. All this is wealth that costs nothing, but fills you more than any purchase. Minimalism is not about refusal, but about taste. It is the art of choosing. When you leave only what makes sense around you. Not because you can't have more, but because you don't need it. Things stop controlling you when each one is chosen consciously. Simple becomes luxurious because there is attention in it. To live beautifully with little means to feel, not to show. It is a state of inner dignity, when you can afford to enjoy without guilt, when you don't look for justification for joy. Beauty doesn't require spending, it requires presence. The taste for life is born not from abundance but from attention. Look around. Everything that truly makes life warm costs almost nothing. Light from the window, clean bedding, silence in which you can hear your breath, simple food cooked without haste. These things don't shout about wealth, but they give a feeling of fullness. A person who knows how to appreciate them is never poor. If you want to live well, stop chasing novelty. Most purchases are an attempt to escape boredom, but boredom is not an enemy. It cleanses perception. When you stop constantly searching for the new, the taste for the real returns. Life becomes deeper, as if it has an aroma again. Buy less, but better. This rule works not only with things, but also with relationships and habits. Let everything that remains in your life have meaning. Let clothes fit comfortably, food nourish, and people nearby bring peace. Luxury is not quantity, but accuracy. Don't be afraid to be simple. Simplicity is not poverty, it is honesty. When you no longer hide behind the external, when you don't need anything superfluous to feel valuable. Strength appears in this simplicity, because everything unnecessary no longer drains energy. To save and live well, you need not to cut joy, but to change its form. Joy is not in things, but in a state, in a feeling of connection. When you eat with gratitude, even simple food becomes a feast. When you rest without guilt, even a short evening turns into a holiday. Create rituals that give life taste. A clean table before bed, the scent of a candle in the evening, a delicious dish for no reason. Small, conscious pleasures make life complete. They don't require money, but they require attention. This is the art of living beautifully with little. Don't collect things, collect moments, peace, clarity. For saving without taste turns into boredom, and taste without awareness into extravagance. There is a thin line between them, a space where a person is truly free. In it, everything is sufficient. In it, it's good simply because you exist, and life has already happened. Saving begins not with a budget, but with inner respect for your energy. Money is only a reflection of how you manage attention, time, and strength. You can accumulate funds, but lose yourself, spending life on unnecessary conversations, external expectations, and meaningless promises. When a person learns not to scatter themselves, a natural resilience appears within them. Then everything that is needed begins to stay. The most dangerous wastefulness is internal. We spend ourselves on what does not nourish, explaining, justifying, clinging to people who have already left. We call this empathy, responsibility, involvement, but in reality it is a form of dependency. The soul tires just like the wallet when it gives where there is no reciprocity. Stop and see where you are losing resources. Perhaps not in purchases, but in thoughts. Every day the mind makes thousands of internal transactions. Attention is currency, and if you constantly spend it on anxiety, comparison, and regrets, No matter what the income, it will always be empty inside. When you stop feeding what destroys you, life gradually recovers. You don't need to do anything special. You just need to stop investing in emptiness. Energy returns to where it was expected. The frugality of the soul is not coldness, but wisdom. Not everyone needs everything explained. Not every conversation is worth your peace. Not every battle deserves your energy. Sometimes generosity is silence. Sometimes kindness is the refusal to continue. If you want to truly save, start with an internal accounting. Notice what leaves you feeling drained. After which meetings, messages, news, is there less light inside? These are your leaks. Don't treat them with new impressions, close them with presence. Learn to say no calmly. This is not harshness, it is guarding the internal budget. The energy you don't waste on external expectations turns into clarity. Correct decisions, including financial ones, are born from this clarity. When you balance the internal economy, the external one also comes into balance. Money goes where there is no chaos, where a person respects their work, their time, their attention, where they are not wasteful, but also not greedy, where everything is distributed according to feeling and not according to fear. To live well is not about an abundance of events, but about equilibrium. When you are not rushing forward and not stuck in the past. When you know how to hold attention in the present, like water in your palms, then a feeling of stability appears from within. The economy of the soul is the ability to be where you are, without haste, without guilt, without unnecessary words. This is not a strategy, but a state. When everything in you stops running, life itself begins to flow. Stop considering as wealth only what can be touched. The most valuable things are peace, clarity, time, and people with whom you don't need to pretend. The real economy of the soul begins where the noise disappears, where you stop proving that you are worthy and simply live. Saving and living well is not a contradiction. It is a balance between the internal "I want" and the external "I must." When you start choosing silence instead of fuss, simplicity instead of showiness, gratitude instead of complaint, life becomes easier. Nothing is lost because you stop losing. Your attention returns to the moment, and with it comes a feeling of abundance. Saving, born of love, does not constrict but liberates. It is not a refusal, but a conscious choice. When you tell yourself, "I have enough," not out of fear, but out of respect. Enough does not mean little, it means whole. It means you no longer measure life by sums. Gratitude turns any small thing into wealth. When you are grateful for the simple, morning, breath, home, the opportunity to share, a quiet confidence is born within you. This peace is more precious than anything, because everything you need is already near, and everything superfluous falls away on its own. You can save and yet live beautifully if you stop evaluating life by external signs. Beauty is not things, but attention. When you pour water into a glass and see the light in it, when you cook food without haste and feel its aroma, when you don't wait for holidays to rejoice, life is good when it is real. When there is no ostentatious shine, but there is taste. When everything is honest, calm, and without unnecessary proof. When money flows naturally because there is no fear in you of either receiving or giving. Wealth is an internal state of sufficiency. When you can look at the world and not look for what else needs to be added to make it better, because it already is. This state makes a person truly free. If these words resonated, write in the comments, "Я выбираю жить осознанно." I choose to live consciously. Let this be your promise to yourself, not to run, not to compare, not to lose peace for the sake of illusions. This is not the end. It is a return to simplicity, where everything truly has value. Here's a small prediction for watching until the end. Someone will offer you a chance to earn. The main thing is not to miss it.